You may be wondering, why is this video here? And what is this guy supposed to teach me about therapy? And how does... Well, I'm not going to guess what you're thinking, because honestly, I'm not exactly a mind reader, but I am a therapist. Social workers specifically, and I wanted to make some videos that I thought would appeal to people just trying to understand the mind and how everything works. Specifically, I'm going to tailor my explorations into therapy towards people who are mental health professionals. You know, social workers, counselors, marriage and family therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists even. Who knows? You never know. You never know. There's kind of a class thing. When I was in college, I had the luxury of taking classes other than my major because I studied philosophy, and it was a pretty easy major if you're just like interested in philosophy. It's like not hard. You just read and write a bit. So I took one day a class, Fundamentals of Painting, and I had such a good professor, and she was just interesting, very talented painter. And one of the really cool things that she said was one day she was just like, you know, guys, if you think about it, like painting, we're really just moving this differently colored material around. And I appreciated that so much because I was so new to painting. I'm not like a skilled painter. I did that one and that one. Oh, and this one. But, I don't think of myself as like having the skills of painting. So just thinking of it in that way of like, oh, wow, okay. I'll just think of the material version of what I'm doing, not get so caught up in creating a beautiful work of art or something. It really took the pressure off. It's similar with therapy, even though therapy is way more serious than my paintings. Like, you're obviously working with someone else when you're doing therapy, and you have to do a good job. You can't just think of it as a conversation and leave it at that or something. But in a similar way, I think breaking down therapy to its fundamentals and material level aspects, is helpful. Just like understanding painting in that way is helpful. In therapy, you're doing a lot of things that can be described with big, complicated meta concepts and stuff. But on the surface of it, you're just two people having a conversation. That's the end of the video and the channel. That's what therapy is. Oh, I have to do more. Okay. Yeah. No, that's fine. What else? There are a lot of things that separate therapy conversations from non-therapy conversations, even though non-therapy conversations can often be very therapeutic and obviously healing and helpful. And sometimes even they're asymmetrical, just like a therapy conversation, with one person helping the other. Primarily, and just that conversation is about that, at that moment. So what makes it different, when you're talking to a therapist, or like, what's the difference between that and just someone going to their friend getting help with a problem? Well, even if it's asymmetrical in the same degree, one big difference is the structured asymmetry. So every single time the therapist and the client meet, the therapist is the one listening primarily. And that relates to the first behavioral rule that I think of, which is yielding. Like, that's priority number one. You're yielding. That's always how it has to work. You need a reason to talk if you're a therapist. You don't just talk and then come up with a reason midway through. And the client never needs a reason to talk. They can talk for whatever reason they want or no reason. It's not about that. But yeah, you're doing your job. That's one thing that separates it, is it's structured asymmetry. You're always in that position. The other thing is the time and calendar aspect, where you're like doing these routine meetings. You're consistent. You can't call in sick more than like once in a very long while. Like, you can't cancel day of. You're always consistent and there for people. So like, they know you'll be there for them when they need to talk. But it's also planned when they need to talk, so they might not feel 100% like they need to talk when they need to talk. And with the calendar stuff also, it's like the hour-long sessions. Like, you got to think about that, Not everybody wants to always talk for an hour and stuff, but that is the standard 55 minutes or whatever. I just do an hour. It's easier. in a way. That's like a standard thing that helps people, know what they're in for, but at the same time, it can be kind of formulaic. So if someone doesn't want to meet for a full hour, I never care at all, and I'm here to do what they want to do. But yeah, there are like these, again, structured aspects of therapy and what makes it different from, non-therapy conversation. Another aspect is the fact that the therapist is for sure going to be well-versed in mental health crap. You just know that the therapist has to be cool with whatever you talk about. They have to be sensitive to it and like understand a whole body of information about how human beings learn, grow, develop, what's normal, what's not normal. We are paid to not have preconceptions, but to have knowledge. Like not come at our work from our beliefs, but from our knowledge. What's the difference? Evidence. We'll probably talk a lot about evidence. So like, for example, as a mental health professional, you can't have the opinion that there are only two genders. Like you can't just take that into your work. If you have that in your personal life, God help you, and you better keep that shit locked down, because like that's just one example of a belief, just like you can't think like white people are supreme. Like you can't take that into your work. Like there are just a lot of beliefs that are just false. And that's the main reason that they can't be brought into the discourse. But they're also obviously very hurtful and damaging and oppressive, to coin a word. Did I not coin that? Okay. I guess another thing that separates therapy conversations from non-therapy conversations, even when the non-therapy ones are pretty therapeutic, is like, in addition to the body of knowledge that, a therapist has to have and bring into their work, there's also different responsibilities. And you obviously have responsibility in your personal life. Like, I'm not trying to say you don't, but when you're a therapist, like, you have different responsibilities. Like, say someone presents a problem to you and you need to give them the answer. I'm just kidding. But like, say that you need to help someone find the answer, to a problem in their life. You're going to be asking questions based on a sort of hypothesis, right? I mean, when I say you don't have preconceptions, I mean, you're still, when you're hearing, that's not a preconception. You're hearing information, you're forming ideas. I'll talk a little in a minute about how I think that works. And you're coming at them with some questions to help them develop ideas or specifically dissect some term that's, perfectly fitting for a feeling and understand that feeling, or you're doing all these different things. Your responsibility there is that your hypothesis is based on a solution specifically because and only if it's best for them. Here's an obvious unethical situation. You find the solution to your client's problem is like they gotta just like shop at a store of a friend of yours, and so you get your friend money. Like that's a stupid example, but like go like 10% there, and like say you're just suggesting to your client something that just works for you, and like that's, you wouldn't think that's selfish. But like in a way it really is, especially when you have to build a long-term relationship with someone. Part of being a therapist is always having this ongoing conversation with someone. So you can't just like fuck it up by always inserting your own shit. To call myself out, I'll suggest writing, journaling, reflecting, creative writing, whatever, especially journaling, writing your thoughts, writing your feelings, writing your dreams, just writing, using the tool of writing, written language, to process information. I think it's fantastic. I am sometimes guilty of mentioning it multiple times to people who have already told me that they, not their thing. I forget. It's hard because I'm so into writing. So I'm calling myself out there because I think different therapists probably have different ones. Whether it's like, oh, they just, I don't know, maybe they need to work less. Like that's the answer. They need to take a day off. Like, yeah, maybe, but maybe not. So one principle that just comes to mind now that should be a whole video is you never know what your client is about to say. Like, they might not even know sometimes. So you have to always clear space and not fill it up with your own crap. that's yielding kind of to them. And that's what we do. So talked a little about the behaviors of a therapist, what you say, what you don't say, how you say things, how you frame things. What about the thoughts of a therapist? Are those different from the thoughts of someone in a non-therapy conversation? Well, what's the difference between a thought and a behavior? Not even talking about the fact that like thoughts are made up of the behaviors of physical, chemical, electrical, biological structures. That's not even what I'm talking about. Like, that's a fact, obviously. But even in the sense of just like in human life, where's the line between a thought and a behavior? A lot of thoughts kind of become behaviors, don't they? I mean, if you think about something enough, can it kind of come out? Or, as we call it, externalization. That's a mental health tip. But I'd say the most important cognitive aspect of what a therapist is doing, which I'll go into much more in another video. This is just an introduction video. The process of active listening is like a very real thing. Like when you're listening to a client talk, like as a therapist, you're basically doing a lot more than just listening. You're making connections, obviously. But active listening is not just nodding and appearing to be active listening. That's a different thing. But actually active listening is, thinking about the patterns. That was just my foot. I didn't get hurt. Don't worry. Thinking about the patterns that basically are being presented to you. And when you're doing that, you're doing what I refer to as induction. I think that's how people use that term. I'm not 100% sure, honestly, but I've looked it up and I'm pretty sure I'm not misusing it that bad. But I understand induction to be when we're coming up with principles from facts that we're faced with in daily life. I see a bunch of things that fit a certain pattern. I induce a principle that explains it. And then when I see more things that fit that pattern, I deduce from that principle what is going on currently or what the characteristics are or whatever. And that's using subject-object relations that I'll probably do a video about. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to study some stuff before I do that. And then there's meta aspects where it's not really something that you're thinking or doing, or it is, but it's better explained by some meta quality, confidentiality. It's about what you do, obviously, as a therapist, at least outside of the session. You're not talking about the stuff that goes on in the session. That is definitely rule number one. But yeah, that's kind of a meta thing. It's, on a different scale than a lot of the qualities we're talking about and stuff. It's outside of the session and stuff, but it's a big, obviously important part of the relationship. Hugely important, essential. So a lot of things to talk about. There's also self-care that will definitely be a whole video at least, and about how to take care of yourself and do your job, because it's hard to focus and be there for other people when you're dealing with your own stuff, and we all go through stuff. Right now it is the end of July 2020. So, the middle, God, I don't even know if the middle is the right way to put it, but in the COVID pandemic, really bad. A lot of people are suffering enormously, and people have lost their jobs. So many people. Evictions are starting to pick up. People are really worried about that. Not all my clients I work with are dealing with everything I just said, but most of them are somewhat affected, or there's indirect effects. It doesn't matter. But the point is, there's way more stress in the world. I know people are always dying, but this is a fucking pandemic, y'all. So this is not cool. And the amount of denial it takes just to get through your day. I mean, we're all exhausted. But anyways, I'll talk more about taking care of yourself because it's so important. And so I think I'll just leave the video here, end it here. I hope you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel if you did. I don't have a Patreon yet. Again, thanks for watching very much. Have a good one.